الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. When it comes to our access to the sensory world, our physical, tangible world, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us 5 senses to access this sensory world, known as the 5 senses: the sense of hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting, and touching. Those are the 5 senses into this tangible and sensory world. However, when it comes to the world of the unseen, the world of the hereafter, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us access to through 7 senses, known in Arabic as al-jawarih, and these are the 5 or 7 limbs instead. These are 7 limbs, not 5. 5 access to the sensory world, 7 access to the world of the hereafter. Each and every one of these limbs, referred to as jariha or jawarih in plural, constitute an access of accruing deeds, good or bad. Nonetheless, the source is the same. The hearing, the sight, the tongue, which is the statement. Also, the mouth has to do with consuming the halal or the haram. The hands, the feet, and also genitals, the private parts. And the Prophet ﷺ made reference to how these limbs, they're the ones who accumulate deeds, bad or good. He says, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, kutiba ala ibni Adam hadduhu min az-zina. Each and every son of Adam has a decree of sinning in regards to either what is known as zina, which is reference to either fornication or adultery. And he says, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that the eye commits zina. And the way it does is by looking at that which is haram. The hearing commits zina, and that is by listening to that which is haram. And he says, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and the hand will go towards zina, and then the feet will walk towards the zina. But he says, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, then the private part will either validate it, meaning to go with it, or reject it and dismiss it altogether. However, the Prophet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, rather spoke about the steps a shaitan takes into convincing a person to fall into fornication or adultery, hence zina, by accessing the gradual steps of the eyes, looking at that which is haram, and the ears, and then the statements, and then the hands will do the process of getting closer and closer towards zina. The feet walk towards it. Feet is not necessarily the steps in a physical sense, but it is reference to how we shrink the distance between us and the commitment of the zina in of itself. And he says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do not follow the luring steps, the convincing steps, the trapping steps of a shaitan, for he is a manifest enemy to you, very clear enemy to you. So the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ in this regard is making reference to how our limbs, they're the ones who commit or accrue deeds, whether that is good or bad. Ibn al-Qayyim makes reference to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala referred to when it comes to the concept of doing business. And he says our evil self as well as our fitra, the natural disposition, the divine natural disposition Allah Ta'ala created us upon to be uh, inclined towards doing good, but also the inclination and the ability to also be wicked, and that is the evil self, the commanding self of doing evil. Both of them, Ibn al-Qayyim said, these are like partners in a business. And he says, like any business that is seeking to have a profit over a period of time, over a number of transactions, he says those partners cannot be successful in having a profit in their business unless they have a process in place, and unless they have what is known as checks and balances, what is known as also contract of the do's and the do nots, the consultation, the supervision of each and every step of that business over the course of either transactions or period of time, or the checks and balances is what keeps a business headed towards a profitable goal. However, he says, if that transaction, or rather the business partnership, is left to negligence, the business will also collapse, and it will end up in ruins. Same thing, he says, that if we ignore our limbs and we don't maintain them, we don't supervise them, checks and balances with our own limbs, what we say, what we look at, and what we listen to, and what we do, and we act upon, that needs to be balanced. And the checks and balances are against the guidance, the divine guidance that came to us from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's very, very straightforward in a sense. At the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warned us to be losing our own selves, because the business at the end, or the merchandise, which is the backbone of the business, is actually ourselves. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَمَنْ زُحْزِحَ عَنِ النَّارِ وَأُدْخِلَ الْجَنَّةَ فَقَدْ فَازَ. That the one who is removed away from hellfire and was admitted into al-Jannah, that person has reached the ultimate win and the ultimate reward. And the same thing, he says, that those who come on the day of judgment with their limbs committing nothing but distractions, they will be going into hellfire. Na'udhu billah, khasiru anfusahum, they lost themselves. And there is also a correlation, subhanallah, between our 7 limbs. These are 7 access points to doing either good or evil. And there's also a correlation between the 7 gates into hellfire, to where there is a correlation between our limbs and the actions committed by those limbs and the gates into hellfire. 7 limbs, 7 gates into hellfire. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us instead the access point to the 8 gates of Al-Jannah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted the people of Al-Jannah, based again on using their 7 limbs to accrue and accumulate and amass good deeds, they will end up into Al-Jannah. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us a knowledge that is of benefit to us. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Muhammad walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.